When my husband, wearing a self-satisfied smirk, threw the divorce papers in my face and declared that he was taking my children, my house, and my own company, I didn't cry. There was no hysteria inside me, and my hands didn't shake, though a searing cold briefly spread through my chest. Instead, my father's voice echoed clearly in my mind, as if he were standing right beside me. He had spent 40 years working as a senior auditor for the Internal Revenue Service, witnessing hundreds of businessmen who thought they were smarter than the system. A couple of months before he passed, sitting in his hospital room to the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, he looked at me with his faded but still incredibly sharp eyes and whispered, "Never argue with a fool, Miranda. Don't waste your breath shouting, and don't try to appeal to his conscience. He doesn't have one. Just silently record his transactions. Remember, sweetheart, people can lie, squirm, play the victim, or act like heroes. But numbers never lie, and if you know how to read them, they will always strike first." Back then, 3 years ago, I only smiled sadly and squeezed his frail, dry hand. I thought his words were simply the professional deformation of an old tax officer tired of endless audits. But on that gray Tuesday, staring at the stack of blue-stamped papers lying on the kitchen table, I realized my father had left me the most powerful weapon in the world, a cold, mathematical mind. What I dug up in my husband's secret accounts over the following weeks turned his grand, meticulously calculated plan of a triumphant victory into a slow-motion financial suicide. And the most beautiful part of it was that he was only going to find out about it in the courtroom once the noose had already tightened around his neck. My name is Miranda. I am 34 years old. For the past 10 years, I have been building my life brick by brick, genuinely believing I was erecting an impenetrable, safe fortress for my family. I am a successful certified public accountant, a forensic auditor, and the owner of the consulting firm Clayton & Partners. My daily job is to tame chaos. Businessmen whose accounting records resemble a pile of debris after a hurricane come to me, and I put their chaos into neat folders. I see this world through the flawless prism of double-entry bookkeeping, balance sheets, rigorous tax returns, and dry, impartial analytics. To my deepest regret, I made the classic mistake of a shoemaker going barefoot. I forgot to apply these same strict auditing standards to my own marriage. My husband, Jasper, was always my complete opposite. He was bright, charismatic, incredibly spontaneous, and absolutely, phenomenally irresponsible. We met when we were in our early 20s. Against the backdrop of my orderly, minute-by-minute student life, Jasper seemed like a breath of fresh air. He would head out in the middle of the night just to go stargazing, spent his last savings on impulsive gifts, and knew how to charm anyone within the first 30 seconds of a conversation. He was the life of every party, a human celebration. My father, upon meeting him for the first time at my birthday party, pulled me aside on the veranda. I remember him thoughtfully lighting his old pipe, looking through the smoke at Jasper laughing in the living room, and quietly saying, "Miranda, this guy is a classic consumer. He only knows how to generate beautiful noise, spending other people's energy and other people's money. A pretty wrapper with nothing but a draft inside. Do your old father a favor, check his credit history and debts before you say 'I do' at the altar." But I was too in love. I thought my father had spent too much time digging through other people's dirty laundry and saw everyone as a potential fraud. I brushed off his advice, chalking it up to the cynicism of an older generation. That was my first, biggest, and most destructive mistake. I believed that my stability and my intellect would be enough for both of us, that my firmness would balance his lightness. During our 10 years of marriage, we had 2 beautiful children, Toby and Clara. Toby is now 9, growing up as a quiet, thoughtful boy who loves building sets, while Clara is 7, a little ray of sunshine who is always singing and drawing on any available surface. For their sake, I worked 14 hours a day. Jasper, on the other hand, changed 5 or 6 jobs during these 10 years. The scenario was always the same. He would get fired up about a new idea, get hired by another company, start complaining 6 months later about the rigidity of management and how his creative genius was underappreciated. and then quit with a scandal. Eventually, he settled into a chair as the so-called creative director at a shady startup involved in vague marketing research. The firm brought in more debt, vanity, and representation expenses than actual income. In fact, our entire family life rested solely on my shoulders. I fully paid for the monthly mortgage payments for our spacious, leafy suburban home, Toby and Clara's tuition at a prestigious private school, family trips twice a year, premium health insurance, all utility bills, nanny services, groceries, and even the gas for Jasper's car. I was spinning like a hamster in a wheel. In the morning, I got the kids ready, drove them to school, then rushed to the office to conduct complex negotiations with clients and untangle tax messes. And in the evening, I returned home to cook dinner and check homework. Jasper, meanwhile, searched for himself, attending endless business lunches, conferences, and presentations, talking about big contracts and high style. I endured it. I felt it was my duty as a loving wife to support my husband during his period of creative search. But the real, undisguised nightmare broke into my life about 6 months ago. It all began with barely noticeable changes in Jasper's behavior. Our once open and noisy home began to fill with a heavy, suffocating atmosphere of secrecy. Jasper suddenly set complex pattern passwords on all his gadgets, his laptop, tablet, phone. He reacted unnaturally and aggressively to my innocent questions. "Miranda, you control my every step. I must have at least some personal space. Or do you want to turn our life into a total audit?" He started staying late for crucial meetings with investors. When he returned, he smelled of expensive perfume and alcohol, and he would irritably brush off any questions, citing extreme exhaustion. And then came that call. I was sitting in my office, reviewing the annual balance sheet of a large manufacturing holding, when Ellen's number flashed on my desk phone. She was a longtime client of mine and an old acquaintance who moved in the same suburban circles as we did. "Miranda, hi!" Her voice sounded unusually quiet, with some plaintive, sympathetic undertones. "I'm just calling to see, how are you? How are the kids? How are you coping with all these upcoming changes?" I took my eyes off the spreadsheets for a second, surprised, and pressed the receiver to my ear. "Hi, Ellen. Thanks, everything is fine. The kids are at school, I'm at work. What changes are you talking about? Everything is the same as usual with us." An awkward, prolonged silence hung over the line. I could physically feel Ellen on the other end of the phone, regretting that she had brought this up at all. "Ellen? What happened?" My voice grew sterner. "Oh, Miranda," she sighed. "Do you really not know? You see, very strange rumors have been circulating around our town, among the school moms and at the local country club for a couple of weeks now. They say that your firm, Clayton and Partners, is on the verge of bankruptcy due to your bad investments, and that against the backdrop of this financial collapse, you have fallen into a severe clinical depression, are abusing sedatives, and have practically stopped taking care of the kids, abandoning them." I froze, feeling everything inside me turn to stone. "What nonsense!" I blurted out. "My firm is showing record profits this quarter. I'm healthy, the kids are fully taken care of. Who is spreading this garbage?" "Well," Ellen hesitated even more. "Mainly Miriam, your mother-in-law, is talking about it very emotionally. She shares this with a deep sigh, as if she is so sorry for her poor daughter-in-law who broke under the weight of her ambitions. But she credits Jasper's words. She says Jasper is literally a saint who is currently single-handedly keeping the collapsing house and kids afloat and trying to save you from falling completely into the abyss." When I hung up the phone, my hands were shaking slightly. The puzzle in my head was rapidly coming together. Miriam, my mother-in-law, had always disliked me. She was a stiff, snobbish woman who believed her son deserved at least a princess, not a boring accountant who only thinks about taxes. But Miriam never had enough imagination to construct such a massive and dirty legend. She was just the megaphone. The real puppeteer, as it turned out a little later, was Serena Morrison. She was a young, predatory, well-groomed 30-year-old owner of the fashionable salon Serena's Luxury Spa, which had opened in our local upscale shopping mall a year ago, and who, as I managed to find out through mutual acquaintances and social media, had been my husband's permanent mistress for over 6 months. It was with her that Jasper spent his meetings with investors, and it was for her that he played the card of a miserable husband trapped in a marriage with a dry, emotionally unstable careerist. The climax of this domestic drama came a week later. On Monday, Jasper didn't come home to sleep at all, sending a short text. "Stuck at the investor's site. Will be home in the morning." I didn't sleep all night. I sat in the dark living room, staring out the window at the empty driveway, realizing there was no turning back. My marriage was dead. It had rotted from the inside out, and the only thing that concerned me now was the safety of my children and the protection of my business. On Tuesday, at exactly 8 in the morning, while the children were still asleep in their rooms on the second floor, the front door quietly creaked open. Jasper walked into the hallway. But he was not alone. Following him, rustling her expensive trench coat and tilting her chin up haughtily, came his mother, Miriam. Jasper was holding a thick leather folder. There was not a shred of remorse or awkwardness on his face. On the contrary, he looked composed, triumphant, and defiantly confident. He walked into the kitchen, where I was sitting at the table with a cup of long, cold black coffee, and laid the folder directly in front of me with a dull thud. "Good morning, Miranda," he said, his voice laced with icy superiority. "We need to talk, and we'd better do it quickly before the kids wake up." I silently stared at the folder, then shifted my gaze to Miriam, who stood by the door, arms crossed, looking at me with undisguised contempt. "What is this, Jasper?" I asked calmly, keeping my voice even. "These are divorce and asset division papers," he replied, casually pulling out a chair and sitting opposite me. "It's over, Miranda. Our marriage has long been a sham, and I have no intention of living in this swamp anymore. I'm filing for divorce." He paused, clearly expecting tears, screams, or pleading questions from me. But I continued to look at him in silence. This slight confusion briefly reflected in his eyes, but he quickly regained his smug demeanor. "To avoid long and dirty court battles, I suggest you sign a peaceful agreement right now. The terms are simple and non-negotiable. Our family home becomes my sole property. I will continue to live here. I demand sole custody of Toby and Clara. You are too busy with your career, constantly disappearing at work, and in your current unstable psychological state, you are unfit to raise children. I demand 50% of the shares in your company, Clayton and Partners, or a cash payment equivalent to the market value of half the business. All these years, I provided you with a safe harbor, took care of the house, and inspired you, so this is rightfully my share." Miriam took a step forward, her pearl necklace quietly clinking. "You'd better agree right away, dear," my mother-in-law added venomously. "We have plenty of witnesses among the neighbors and teachers who will confirm in court that you are emotionally unstable, rely on pills, and abandon your children for your reports. We will simply destroy your reputation. Your clients will run away when they find out what kind of mother and wife you really are. Don't bring this to shame. Sign the papers." For a second, the world around me spun. The air in the kitchen grew thick and sticky. Every word they spoke was saturated with such concentrated lies and malice that I physically wanted to scream, grab that cup of coffee, and splash it in the face of this smug man with whom I had shared a bed for 10 years. But deep down, beneath the layers of shock, pain, and resentment, the cold, calculating mind of a professional auditor awoke. I looked at Jasper's triumphant face, at Miriam's victorious, predatory smile. "They want war?" I thought. "They want to take my children and my business using dirty rumors and blackmail. Fine. But they forgot that in this game, they are amateurs playing on emotions, while I am a professional working with facts." I took a deep, slow breath, squared my shoulders, and looked Jasper straight in the eyes. Not a single emotion registered on my face. "I will review these documents, Jasper," I said quietly and calmly, closing the folder. "My lawyer will contact your representative." And now, please leave my kitchen. I need to get the kids ready for school." Jasper grunted in disappointment, clearly expecting a dramatic scene, but then smirked again as he got up from his chair. "Think fast, Miranda. Time is not on your side." They left, slamming the door loudly. I was left sitting alone in the empty kitchen. My hands were no longer shaking. A cold, pure fire burned inside me. The game had begun, and they had no idea what a deadly trap they had just helped me construct for them. The next 3 weeks turned into a true test of endurance. Jasper, Miriam, and undoubtedly Serena Morrison launched a coordinated campaign to destroy my reputation. Our quiet, respectable suburb was quickly flooded with the most unbelievable and filthy rumors. Serena, using her extensive connections among local bloggers, beauty salon owners, and bored housewives, actively promoted the image of a poor single father on social media. Anonymous posts began to appear in our neighborhood's closed group chats about how a well-known local business lady completely abandoned her children, driving her husband to nervous exhaustion with her constant outbursts of anger and abuse. It became hard for me to simply go outside. On the playground where I brought Clara, other mothers would pointedly stop talking when I approached and sit on neighboring benches. When I tried to speak to any of Toby's classmates' parents, they would politely, but extremely coldly, cut the conversation short, citing a rush. The pressure started at work, too. 2 of my firm's major clients, owners of a restaurant chain and a construction company, delicately asked my assistants whether my divorce process would affect the confidentiality of their financial data and the quality of our auditing services. "Miranda, we highly value your professionalism," one of them told me carefully over the phone. "But you understand, in our business, reputation is everything. There are too many strange conversations surrounding your name right now. We just want to be sure our affairs are safe." Jasper behaved in a pointedly arrogant and provocative manner. He flatly refused to move out of the house, taking over the guest bedroom and claiming that this is his legal property and he will not leave the children under the supervision of an unstable mother. In front of the children, he played the role of an ideal, loving, and caring father. He bought them piles of expensive toys, took them to amusement parks, and at the same time, methodically whispered poisonous words into their ears. "Your mother wants to take you away from me, kids. She wants to drag you to a small, dark apartment on the other side of town where you'll never see your friends again. But don't worry, Daddy is fighting for you. Daddy will never abandon you." Toby withdrew into himself after these conversations, sitting in his room for hours, while little Clara often cried at night, clinging to me and asking, "Mommy, is it true that we are leaving Daddy? Why does Daddy say you are angry at him?" Every time I tried to talk to Jasper in private, demanding that he stop manipulating the children, he would instantly whip out his phone, turn on the voice recorder, and begin speaking in a pointedly polite, sugary voice, trying to provoke me into shouting or insults. "Miranda, dear, why are you screaming at me again? I just want peace for our children. Please, calm down. Your aggression scares me." In those moments, I wanted to grab a heavy vase and smash it over his fake, smiling face. My heart pounded in my chest like crazy, and tears of helpless rage welled up in my throat. But I forced myself to close my mouth, turn around, and walk away into my office. Every night, when the children finally fell asleep and a suffocating silence settled over the house, I sat at my desk, opened my personal laptop, and brought back the image of my father. "Emotions are a liability, Miranda," I would whisper his favorite saying to myself. "They only drain your strength and lead to mistakes. Facts and figures are your only asset. Let's work with the assets." My first step was finding the right lawyer. I didn't just need a good attorney. I needed a ruthless predator who knew how to fight in the legal arena and wouldn't flinch at the dirty tricks of our opponents. And I found her. Alicia was a legend among family law attorneys in our state. Stories of her iron grip, phenomenal memory, and complete lack of sentimentality were widespread. They said she was capable of leaving any arrogant husband penniless if he dared hide assets from his spouse. Her office, located on the top floor of a business center, did not look like the typical fancy law offices with leather chairs and gold-framed paintings. It was piled high with strict archival folders and boxes of documents, resembling the headquarters of an analytical service. Alicia herself, a fit woman of indeterminate age with short hair and sharp steel eyes, greeted me without unnecessary formalities. She poured herself a cup of incredibly strong black coffee, pointed to a chair opposite her, and listened to my story without interrupting once. When I finished, she took a slow sip, leaned back in her chair, and narrowed her eyes slightly. "So, Miranda Clayton, your husband is a classic narcissist with a penchant for manipulation, backed by a toxic mother and an ambitious mistress. They have launched a smear campaign against you to knock the ground from under your feet and force you to sign a ruinous agreement. Tell me straight, do you just want to get divorced and end this nightmare quickly? Or do you want to reclaim your life, protect your children, and make them pay for every lie?" "I want to protect my children and keep what I earned through my own hard work," I replied, looking her straight in the eyes. "And I want Jasper to answer for every penny he stole from our family and every lie he spread." Alicia smiled. It was the cold, terrifying smile of a predator that had just spotted large and easy prey. "Excellent. I like your attitude. Then let's agree right now. From this second on, you forget about emotions. No tears, no explaining yourself to neighbors, no screaming at your husband. Let them think their plan is working, and you are slowly breaking. We need the illusion of complete submission on your part, and while they celebrate their imaginary victory, we will focus on what you do best. Numbers." She pulled a clean notepad toward her. "Tell me everything about your family assets. Every bank account, every property, every loan. We need to pull all transactions from the last 7 to 10 years. If your husband spent money on his mistress or tried to hide income, we will find that trail. Let's start digging." As it grew completely dark outside and a steady, lulling summer rain began to rustle against my office windows, I was left alone with the glowing screen of my laptop and a cup of cold tea. My thoughts involuntarily drifted back to 3 years ago. The hospital room on the 7th floor of the city hospital was filled with the smell of antiseptics and the muffled, rhythmic beeping of medical equipment. My father, once a tall, strong man with a booming voice, now seemed fragile and almost translucent under the white hospital sheet. But his mind remained as sharp as a surgeon's scalpel until his very last breath. That evening, he beckoned me closer, gesturing for me to lean right down to his face. "Miranda," he whispered, his dry lips barely twitching in an attempt to smile. "My earthly balance sheet is almost settled. I'm not leaving you many things you can touch with your hands, but I've left you the most important thing. My knowledge. And something else. There are $180,000 in my personal account. It's everything I managed to save over 40 years of honest service in the tax department." He took a heavy, wheezing breath and closed his eyes for a moment to gather his strength. "I want you to promise me one thing. This money belongs to you. Only you. It must not go toward funding another one of your husband's brilliant business ideas. I know Jasper, Miranda. He is like a financial black hole. No matter how much you throw in, it all disappears without a trace. Promise me you will set up a closed trust account, register it solely in your name. Let that money sit untouched. It will go either toward Toby and Clara's college when they grow up, or for that extreme emergency when you need complete, absolute financial freedom. Never, do you hear me? Never mix the personal memory of your father with your shared family pot." I cried, kissing his cold fingers, and nodded obediently. That very month, after my father passed, I carried out his will to the letter. I contacted a reliable bank and opened an irrevocable, designated trust where I was listed as the sole trustee and manager, and our children were named as the ultimate beneficiaries. Jasper, of course, found out about this inheritance. Oh, how beautifully he could sing when he needed money. "Miranda, it's foolish to keep such a sum at a miserable interest rate," he persuaded me over dinner, gently patting my hand. "Let's invest it in my friend's project. They are launching a revolutionary online marketing platform. In 2 years, we'll triple this capital. We'll be able to buy a villa in Spain." When I politely but firmly refused, his tone changed. He tried to manipulate me with guilt. "You don't trust me, do you? We are one family, Miranda. My money is our money, but your money is only yours? That's not fair. Your father always disliked me, and you're carrying on his legacy even after his death." I stood my ground. I simply kept quiet in response to his reproaches, remembering my father's tired eyes in the hospital room. And now, 3 years later, I silently thanked my dad every single second. The day after my visit to Alicia, I received the first batch of documents that Jasper's lawyers had submitted to justify their demands. I laid out the printouts on the huge oak table in my office and began analyzing them in detail. My professional eye instantly caught the attachments to the lawsuit. Jasper's lawyer had provided the court with statements showing that Jasper had allegedly co-funded family needs from his personal funds on a regular basis, along with copies of transfer receipts whose amounts suspiciously coincided with the dates of my rare withdrawals of interest from the trust account. Their logic was simple and legally treacherous. They were trying to prove to the court that over the course of 3 years, the boundaries between my personal inheritance and the shared family budget had been completely blurred. In legal practice, this is called the commingling of assets. If they succeeded in proving this, the judge would have every right to declare those $180,000 joint property and divide them in half during the divorce. I turned on the desk lamp, opened my online banking portal, and began to systematically, transaction by transaction, verify every single number. I dug deeper, requesting bank transfer archives. After 4 hours of uninterrupted work, I held irrefutable proof of their lies in my hands. It turned out that Jasper had submitted cleverly forged duplicates of payment orders to the court. On paper, it looked as though he had transferred large sums to our joint account labeled repayment of trust debt or budget top-up. In reality, the original bank statements I obtained directly from the processing center showed a completely different picture. First, all interest from my father's trust account was automatically transferred to a separate savings sub-account to which Jasper never had access. In 3 years, not a single cent had been withdrawn from this sub-account for current expenses. Second, the contributions Jasper allegedly made to our joint account were actually short-term, interest-free loans he took out in his own name from microfinance organizations to cover the deficits on his own cards, and then paid them off using our joint credit card, which of course I paid off in full at the end of the month from my earnings. I took screenshots of the original transactions, certified them with my digital signature as a certified auditor, and neatly filed them in a folder labeled Counter Archive, Inheritance Division. The law of our state protects property received as a gift or inheritance only if the owner kept it separate and did not use it for marital needs. I had maintained that separation in perfect, sterile condition. The first bastion of my defense stood unshakable. Jasper's claims on my company outraged me even more than his attempts to get to my father's money. Clayton and Partners was not just a source of income, it was my brainchild, my personal professional triumph. I registered the firm 18 months before our wedding. At the time, I didn't have an office in an upscale district or a staff of 12 highly qualified specialists. There was only an old laptop, a rented desk shared with a colleague in a stuffy co-working space, and a colossal, almost manic desire to prove to everyone that I could build the best consulting service in the city. I remember those first months. I worked without weekends, falling asleep right at the keyboard, eating cheap fast food, and personally visiting potential clients to offer them a free audit for the first month, just to prove my worth. Every single one of my modest savings went toward paying fees, buying licensed software, and registering the trademark. Jasper, meanwhile, fluttered through life, shifting from one sketchy job to another and spending his modest earnings on trendy clothes and parties with friends. He entered my life when the company's foundation was already firmly laid and the first major clients had begun to bring in a stable profit. And now, 10 years later, his lawyer declared in his lawsuit with great pomp, Mr. Clayton acted as an indispensable business partner and creative inspiration for the consulting group throughout the marriage. His contribution to creating a favorable home environment, caring for the children, and moral support allowed Mrs. Clayton to focus entirely on commercial activities, which led to a manifold increase in the business's capitalization. On this basis, Mr. Clayton claims 50% of the company's shares, or a commensurate cash compensation. Moral support? Alicia, sitting opposite me in her office, laughed heartily as she studied the paragraph. Good God, how typical! They always sing about a favorable home environment when they don't have a penny to their name. Well, Miranda, let's show them what his moral support actually consisted of. Alicia, my team of assistants, and I began to systematically dismantle this illusion. Incorporation documents do not expire. We pulled up the company's primary registration. The creation date was 18 months prior to the marriage. The share capital was formed solely from my personal premarital savings. Not a single penny from Jasper or his relatives had ever entered the capital. Zero involvement in operations. We conducted a full review of HR documents over 10 years. Jasper was never listed as an employee of Clayton and Partners. He never signed a single employment contract, never received a single paycheck, and his signature was absent from every contract with clients or suppliers. Furthermore, we pulled the security camera footage from our office for the past 2 years. Jasper had only shown up at our office 3 times, and solely to borrow cash from me for pocket expenses. Caring for the home, at a cost of thousands of dollars. To completely destroy the myth that Jasper carried the household and kids on his back while I made a career, we gathered statements from all my business accounts and personal cards. It turned out that all household processes were completely outsourced and paid for by me. Receipts for the services of visiting nannies over 8 years, contracts and regular payments to a cleaning company that cleaned our house twice a week, statements from ready meal delivery services and restaurant bills. Jasper had not cooked a single full meal for the children in 10 years. When Alicia laid out these neatly filed stacks of documents, tables, and witness statements from the nannies on her table, she looked at me triumphantly over her thin-framed glasses. Miranda, your business is protected by armor they can't penetrate. Our state's law is clear. Premarital property remains personal unless the other spouse made a significant contribution to its improvement or development. And judging by these numbers, your husband's only contribution was the bills from bars and spa salons that he paid with an additional credit card linked to your account. But look at this. Alicia paused and pulled a thick paper envelope with the logo of a major national bank from the folder. This was the response to our official subpoena regarding our family home. I reached out, took the document, and began to read. With each new line, my eyes widened, and my breathing became shallow and rapid. A wave of deafening, ringing fury rose inside me, making Alicia's office feel unnaturally quiet for a moment. I could hear my own heart hammering wildly. Jasper had committed an act that went far beyond ordinary marital infidelity or selfishness. He had committed a crime that could have left our entire family, including our children, destitute. But in that very second, I realized this crime would become his personal scaffold. The bank document contained a complete, uncensored history of our family home over the past 2 years. Our suburban home was valued at approximately $650,000. We had purchased it 6 years ago, and thanks to my monthly payments, which significantly exceeded the minimum requirement, most of the mortgage had already been successfully paid off. I was absolutely certain that our debt to the bank was no more than $100,000, and that a couple more years would make the house our absolute clear property. But the reality was horrifying. 18 months ago, Jasper, using a forged power of attorney, my signature on the master agreement was expertly falsified, which was later confirmed by a handwriting expert, carried out a so-called cash-out refinance under the security of our existing equity. He withdrew nearly all of the available equity from our home, a whopping $352,000 in cash. My God, I whispered, feeling my head spin. Where did he put this money? Our joint account has never seen such sums. Oh, your husband turned out to be a very generous man, Miranda. Alicia turned the page of the report, where key transactions were highlighted in blue marker. But unfortunately for him, not at his own expense. Look at these transfers. About $100,000 went toward purchasing a brand new premium sports car, which is registered in his name, but which your neighbors and speeding tickets show is constantly driven by Ms. Serena Morrison. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. The most interesting part is further down. Nearly $250,000 were transferred directly in a single transaction to the bank account of Serena's luxury spa. I looked at the figures, unable to believe my eyes. Jasper hadn't just gotten a mistress, he had literally robbed our children, stripping them of their home to finance the business of his lover, who in the meantime was acting like a successful, independent, self-made woman on social media. But my husband's financial genius didn't stop there. Alicia pulled out another document, a copy of a commercial loan agreement dated 6 months prior. When Serena's spa salon ran into serious trouble with the tax authorities and suppliers of expensive equipment from Europe, Jasper, to save her business from imminent bankruptcy, signed a personal guarantee agreement. He acted as a joint guarantor for a large commercial loan for Serena's luxury spa in the amount of $400,000. This meant the following. If Serena Morrison's company could not repay this loan, and judging by the statements, the salon was already teetering on the brink of closure, the bank had the full legal right to demand the entire debt, all $400,000, personally from Jasper. Our family home was now burdened with a massive new mortgage that Jasper had taken out behind my back. The net equity of the house was now zero. Moreover, the monthly payment under this new refinancing scheme had jumped to $5,000 a month, an amount Jasper, with his nominal salary as a creative director, could not afford to pay for even 2 consecutive months. I sat in my chair, feeling cold, calculating rage wash over me. This man wanted to take my children, accusing me of instability, while he himself was hanging by a thread from a colossal financial collapse. Alicia slowly leaned toward me across her wide desk. Her eyes burned with the cold fire of true excitement. Miranda, he wants this house so badly? He claims it in his lawsuit as the main prize? Let's give it to him. I raised my eyes to her in astonishment. Give it to him? But Alicia, that's our house. The children's rooms are there. Listen to me very carefully, my lawyer interrupted, her voice sounding quiet and intense, as if she were reading the rules of a winning chess game. Jasper and his lawyer are convinced they are smarter than everyone. They see the beautiful facade of a $650,000 house and think it's a clean asset. They don't know we've already dug up the entire scheme with the forged power of attorney, the refinancing, and his personal guarantee for Serena's spa. They think this secret is safely buried under a pile of interbank documents. Alicia tapped her long fingernail on the papers. We will play their game. We will pretend to be broken by their smear campaign in the press. At the next negotiations, we will agree to cede the house to him. We will give him this empty shell, this debt pit wrapped in a beautiful package. But in return, we will demand that he sign an ironclad final agreement. He completely and unconditionally waives any claims to your company, Clayton and Partners, your inheritance, and any of your personal accounts. And he also takes sole and full financial responsibility for all debt obligations, loans, and other financial encumbrances associated with the family home, as well as any loan agreements where he acts as borrower, co-borrower, or guarantor. I slowly looked at the statements, then at Alicia. A matching, cold smile began to form on my face. That is brilliant, Alicia. We will feed him his own greed. Exactly, the lawyer smiled predatorily. He will stick his own head into this noose. All we have to do is wait for the judge to pull the knot. Playing the role of a victim when a cold fire of righteous anger burns inside you is perhaps the most difficult acting task I have ever faced in my life. But I understood. Any wrong move, any glimpse of my true confidence might make Jasper or his lawyer suspicious and prompt them to dig deeper. And we needed them to remain blind in their vanity. I began to systematically change my behavior. In Jasper's presence, I no longer tried to defend myself. My shoulders slumped, my gaze became dull. I almost stopped wearing makeup and walked around the house in oversized gray cardigans, creating the illusion of a woman crushed by depression and fear of the future. I reduced my time at the office of Clayton and Partners, shifting most of my client meetings to an online format. A new wave of rumors swept through the town, carefully nurtured by Miriam and Serena. Miranda Clayton has finally given up. She barely leaves her house, her firm is withered, and poor Jasper is trying his best to keep up appearances in front of the neighbors. Jasper blossomed. His walk became casual and regal. He virtually stopped hiding his absences and returned home in the early hours of the morning, pointedly slamming the door. One evening, he walked into the kitchen where I was sitting, clutching a cup of warm milk. I was wearing an old bathrobe, and my hair was messily gathered in a bun. Jasper poured himself a glass of whiskey, tossed in a few ice cubes, and leaned against the kitchen island with a mocking smile. "So, Miranda," he drawled, admiring his reflection in the glass. "Your praised consulting empire didn't save you, did it? All your charts, audits, and smart books turned out to be useless when it came to real life. You'll be left with nothing. I'll take this house, I'll take the kids, and you'll spend the rest of your days paying me child support and watching from the window of a rented hovel as Serena raises Toby and Clara within these walls. You made a fatal mistake when you decided you were smarter than me." I lowered my head even further so he wouldn't see the wild, cold smirk in my eyes. The voice recorder lay in my pocket, switched on. It captured his every word, every insult, and every threat. It had no direct weight for the division of property, but for the psychological portrait of a father in the custody court, it was priceless material. I pretended to barely hold back tears and asked in a quiet voice, trembling with fake despair, "Jasper, do you really want to take this house? Are you sure you can handle it? It's such a huge expense. Maintenance, taxes, mortgage. Maybe we can find a compromise." "Oh, don't worry about me, dear," he laughed loudly, reveling in his imaginary power. "I'll find a use for this property, but it's time for you to pack your bags. Your time is up." I kept quiet, obediently sniffing my nose. My silent trap clicked shut by one more notch. A week later, Alicia officially invited Jasper's side to a preliminary meeting to sign the pretrial settlement agreement on the division of assets. The meeting took place in the conference room of Alicia's office. Jasper arrived accompanied by his lawyer, a polished man named Arthur, who exuded patronizing superiority with his entire appearance. Jasper himself sat in an expensive suit, casually lounging in his chair and almost resting his foot on his knee. Alicia and I played out a flawless performance. Alicia sighed heavily, shuffled her papers, and said in a quiet, tired voice, "My client is in an extremely difficult emotional state and is exhausted by this war. We understand that a trial will cause irreparable harm to the children and to the reputation of Clayton and Partners. Therefore, Mrs. Clayton is ready to make unprecedented concessions for the sake of making peace." Jasper's lawyer, Arthur, exchanged a triumphant look with his client. A predatory smile played on his lips. "We are glad that common sense has finally prevailed," Arthur said haughtily. "So, what are your terms?" Alicia read out the clauses of our agreement. Miranda Clayton voluntarily and completely waives all rights to the family home in favor of Jasper Clayton. Jasper Clayton, in return, signs a final, unconditional waiver of any claims to the company Clayton and Partners, any of its subsidiaries, and any of Miranda Clayton's personal accounts, including her father's trust. Jasper Clayton assumes sole and full liability for all debt obligations, loans, and other financial encumbrances associated with the family home, as well as any loan agreements where he acts as borrower, co-borrower, or guarantor. Arthur quickly ran his eyes over the text of the agreement. For a moment, a flash of hesitation appeared in his eyes. As an experienced lawyer, he understood that the clause about all debts on the house sounded serious. But in his mind, there was only a tiny remainder of the old mortgage on the house, which Jasper could easily cover. He didn't know the most important part. He didn't know about the secret $352,000 refinance Jasper had pulled with a forged power of attorney, or the $400,000 guarantee for Serena's spa. Jasper, of course, had hidden these facts from his own lawyer to avoid looking like a fraud and a thief in his eyes. Arthur leaned toward Jasper and asked quietly, "Jasper, we don't have any hidden debts on the house that I need to know about." No, of course not. Jasper brushed him off carelessly, casually spinning an expensive pen in his hands. Just a regular mortgage. There are pennies left. Let's sign. Jasper was so blinded by the opportunity to take a luxury mansion worth $650,000, virtually for free, and rub my nose in it that he was ready to sign any paper. He believed he was making the deal of his life. With a wide, triumphant smirk, Jasper boldly signed his name on the agreement. His lawyer certified the document with his stamp. When the folder closed, Alicia neatly pulled it toward herself. At that moment, her steel eyes flashed with such force that Jasper froze for a second, as if feeling an invisible noose gently wrap around his neck. But he quickly shook off the feeling, stood up, and left the office with his lawyer without saying goodbye. They went to celebrate their victory, but Alicia and I remained in the office. "Well, Miranda," Alicia said quietly, her face breaking into a satisfied smile. "He just signed his own death warrant. Now all we have to do is wait for the custody court. It's going to be an unforgettable show." The day of the court hearing turned out to be rainy, windy, and gray. The leaden sky over the city seemed to reflect the harsh justice that was about to be served behind the closed doors of courtroom number 402. The courtroom was filled with the heavy smell of official paper, old wood, and polish. A whole support group was deployed on Jasper's side. In the front row of the gallery sat Miriam, dressed in her best black dress and a massive pearl necklace. She threw triumphant, dismissive glances at me, sighing dramatically from time to time. A little further back, on the rear bench, sat Serena Morrison. She looked flawless. A tailored yet provocatively expensive beige suit, immaculate hair. She already felt like the rightful mistress of my former home and the stepmother of my children. Jasper sat at the plaintiff's table next to Arthur. He looked like a conqueror, glancing patronizingly in my direction. Judge Eldridge, a stern, elderly woman in a black robe with neat gray hair and a piercing, icy gaze, was slowly reviewing the case files, occasionally adjusting her thin, gold-rimmed glasses. Jasper's lawyer was the first to speak. He began his speech with a pathetic, well-rehearsed description of what an ideal, self-sacrificing father Jasper was, and how much the children had suffered from the coldness, careerism, and emotional instability of their mother. "Your Honor," Arthur proclaimed, pacing smoothly around the room, "my client made colossal, truly noble concessions. He agreed to leave his former spouse her successful business, despite having every right to a share in it. All this devoted father asks is to maintain a stable, loving, and familiar environment for his children in their childhood home, where they grew up. Mr. Clayton assumes full ownership of the house and is ready to raise Toby and Clara with love and care, while Mrs. Clayton can fully dedicate herself to her career, which she has always valued above her own family." In the gallery, Miriam sympathetically pressed a lace handkerchief to her eyes, letting out a quiet, feigned sob. Judge Eldridge made a note in her pad and turned her icy gaze toward our table. "What does the defense say?" Alicia rose calmly from her seat, wearing a tailored navy suit. Her movements exuded absolute, terrifying confidence. "Your Honor," Alicia said in a steady, deep, and remarkably clear voice, "we fully agree that the interest of the children are the primary and only priority of this proceeding. That is why we gladly confirm our agreement to transfer ownership of the family home to Mr. Clayton. Furthermore, we insist that this decision, recorded in the settlement agreement signed by the parties, be finalized by the court and not be subject to review." Jasper smiled triumphantly and nudged Arthur slightly with his elbow. They were sure the deal was done. "However," Alicia continued, and this brief pause caused Jasper's smirk to wither slightly, "we are obligated to provide the court with a complete picture of Mr. Clayton's actual financial standing. This is necessary so that Your Honor can objectively assess how well his grand plans for raising the children align with his real capabilities. We must also shed light on exactly how this house turned from a cozy family nest into a bottomless pit of debt." Alicia walked over to the judge's bench and handed a stack of documents to the clerk. "Before you, Your Honor, are the results of an independent financial audit conducted by certified accountants, as well as official bank responses to our subpoenas." 18 months ago, Mr. Clayton, using a forged power of attorney in my client's name, the signature on which was expertly falsified, the expert opinion is attached on page 14, secretly refinanced the family home. A dead, ringing silence fell over the courtroom. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Jasper suddenly sit up straight in his chair, his handsome face turning pale and breaking out in a cold sweat. He withdrew $352,000 in cash from the home's equity, Alicia continued, enunciating every word. Of these funds, $252,000 were transferred directly in a single transaction to the bank account of Serena's Luxury Spa, owned by Serena Morrison, who is present here. Thus, Mr. Clayton burdened the family property with a colossal debt, not for the needs of his family or children, but for the personal funding of his mistress. "That's a lie!" Jasper shouted, jumping up from his seat. His voice cracked into a screech. "She's lying about everything! These papers are fabricated!" "Mr. Clayton, sit down and remain orderly, or you will be removed from the courtroom for contempt." Judge Eldridge cut him off in a flat, commanding tone, without even raising her head from the documents. Jasper slumped heavily back into his chair, his hands shaking. He threw a wild, pleading look at Arthur, but his lawyer was sitting with his mouth open, frantically flipping through the copies of the statements Alicia had provided. He realized his client had set him up in the most brutal way possible. Alicia didn't even turn in their direction. She continued her report with the ruthless calm of a machine. Furthermore, 6 months ago, Mr. Clayton acted as a personal guarantor for a commercial loan to Ms. Morrison's company in the amount of $400,000. To date, according to the official notice from the bank, page 22, Serena's Luxury Spa has completely missed payments for 3 months. The bank has officially begun the foreclosure process to collect the entire debt personally from Mr. Clayton as the joint guarantor. Judge Eldridge began to flip through the documents quickly, her gray eyebrows drawing closer to the bridge of her nose. She looked at Jasper with a long, heavy, and contemptuous gaze. "Thus," Alicia concluded, returning to our table, "in handing the house over to Mr. Clayton, we are handing him an asset whose debt exceeds its actual market value. Today, the monthly mortgage payment, which he himself increased, is $5,000 a month. This is an amount that is 2.5 times Mr. Clayton's official monthly income. Our side voluntarily leaves this house and all associated debts to Mr. Clayton, in accordance with the agreement he signed. But we categorically object to granting custody to a father who is on the verge of inevitable personal bankruptcy, involved in forgery and financial fraud, and has no real ability to provide even basic living conditions for the children." Jasper's lawyer jumped up, his face red with embarrassment and anger. "Your Honor, we were not warned about these documents. My client. We request a postponement of the hearing to study the materials in detail." "Denied," Judge Eldridge snapped. "These documents are official bank statements of your own client. If you did not bother to check your own client's financial integrity before filing custody lawsuits, that is a problem of your professional competence, not of this court." The judge turned to Jasper. "Mr. Clayton, stand up." Jasper rose slowly from his seat, as if his legs were made of cotton. Not a trace of his former charisma, polish, and self-confidence remained. He looked like a beaten, pathetic dog. "Explain to the court," Judge Eldridge said quietly but clearly, "how you plan to pay a mortgage of $5,000 a month with an official income of $2,500, while having outstanding debt obligations under a personal guarantee of $400,000. And how, with these funds, do you plan to support 2 minor children?" Jasper opened and closed his mouth, but only an unintelligible, raspy mumble came out of his throat. He turned to his mother, but Miriam herself sat pale as chalk, staring fearfully at the floor and hiding her eyes. On the back bench, Serena Morrison slowly stood up, adjusted her handbag, and without saying a word, walked out of the courtroom with quick, silent steps. She was a clever predator and instantly realized her financial savior had just turned into a broke bankrupt from whom the bank would soon strip his last skin. She had no intention of sinking with him. Judge Eldridge made several sweeping notes in her pad, paused for a few seconds to let the silence fill the room, and then read out her decision. The court, having examined the evidence presented, decrees: approve the agreement of the parties regarding the division of assets. The family home passes into the sole ownership of Jasper Clayton, along with all obligations for its mortgage, refinancing, and any other debts. Recognize the company, Clayton and Partners, and the trust account in the amount of $180,000 as the personal, premarital, and inherited property of Miranda Clayton, not subject to division. In view of the revealed facts of financial insolvency, forgery of documents, and fraud on the part of the father, determine the primary residence of the children, Toby and Clara, with their mother, Miranda Clayton. Order Jasper Clayton to pay child support in accordance with state law. When the judge brought down her wooden gavel with a dull thud, declaring the session closed, I closed my eyes and took a deep, clean breath for the first time in these hellish 6 months. The tension that had held my body in an iron grip finally let go. Tears welled up in my eyes, but they were tears of relief and triumph. I looked at Jasper. He sat with his head in his hands, staring at the polished surface of the table. His life, built on lies, manipulation, and theft, had just collapsed right in front of him, burying him under the rubble of his own greed. Life after the court turned with incredible speed, and all the pieces of the puzzle fell into place so quickly, as if the universe itself were helping to restore justice. Jasper couldn't even pay the first month of the updated mortgage. Just 3 months later, the bank officially repossessed our former house and put it up for foreclosure. Due to the massive debt Jasper had saddled the house with during the refinance and a dip in real estate prices, the house was sold for next to nothing. The proceeds didn't even come close to covering his debts to the bank. His sham, creative business collapsed completely when the bank blocked all his personal accounts due to his joint guarantee for Serena's loan. Serena herself declared complete bankruptcy for her spa salon and hastily left town for parts unknown, cutting off all contact with Jasper. They say my ex-husband now lives in a tiny, stuffy rented one-bedroom apartment on the very edge of the industrial zone and works as a low-level sales representative, giving up more than half of his modest earnings to pay off his debts and child support. Miriam no longer shows her face in our neighborhood. Her snobbery vanished when the court records of our case became public. The neighbors quickly found out the truth from the open registries, and those same mothers on the playground who once turned away from me now smile obsequiously when we meet, trying to strike up a conversation and apologizing for their past behavior. But I no longer care about them. As for me and my children, my business made a colossal leap forward. Clients, learning how brilliantly I had conducted my own audit, exposed a fraudster, and protected my company, began to trust me even more. The nature of consulting is simple. If you can protect yourself in such a legal and financial meat grinder, it means you can protect someone else's business from any threats. Our turnover doubled this year. My father's inheritance remained completely intact. Those $180,000 are still sitting in the secure trust account, waiting for Toby and Clara to come of age, guaranteeing them a better future and education. We moved. I bought a brand new, incredibly bright, spacious, and cozy townhouse in a beautiful, quiet neighborhood near the park. There are no heavy memories here, no lies, and no manipulation. Here, children's laughter rings out, and peace, stability, and confidence in tomorrow reign. This story taught me the most important lesson. Your reputation, your name, and your composure are the most valuable assets you have. It doesn't matter how much dirt your enemies try to throw at you, and it doesn't matter how strong their temporary triumph seems. If truth, a clear mind, and irrefutable evidence are on your side, you will always win. This story has reached its finale, but it leaves behind one very important, fundamental question that I often ponder in the evenings. How do you feel about this? Did Miranda do the right thing by laying this financial trap and leaving her ex-husband face-to-face with the debts he created himself, effectively ruining his life? Share your honest opinion in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with anyone who might be going through a tough time right now, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new gripping real-life dramas where justice and numbers always find their way to victory.